And now, Black by popular demand. That professor of liberty, that nemesis of liberals, that all-around nice guy, Walter E. Williams.
That's right, Johnny Donovan. Walter Williams substituting for Rush, and Rush will be back on Monday. Folks, we have a lot to do today, and stay tuned for the second hour because we're going to have Professor Milton Friedman on. And we're going to talk about vouchers. Actually, there's a case before the Supreme Court on educational vouchers, and the Supreme Court has not made its decision yet, but they will soon, and so we're going to talk about that. Keep in mind that Milton Friedman, he's a senior fellow at the Hoover Institution, and he's a Nobel laureate who's done path-breaking work in economics, and we'll talk about that a little more later on. Today, folks, is Flag Day. So we should, I have a flag flying in my house, and we have flags around here. And yes, we have flags around here, and I have a flag on the back of my automobile. So it's Flag Day. There's another kind of anniversary. Today it's the 30th anniversary of the DDT ban. DDT is a pesticide. And there's a Wall Street Journal article today, an editorial section of the Wall Street Journal. And the Wall Street Journal says, count us out of any celebration. Instead, what we need to do is mourn for the 30 to 60 million people around the world, according to the World Health Organization, who died from malaria as a result of the DDT ban. Now, you know, we have some environmental wackos in our country who have a callous disregard for human life. You know, back, I think it started out with, what is Rachel somebody's Silent Spring. What was it, Brett? Yeah, right. Rachel Carson. Thanks, Brett. Who wrote Silent Spring, and they're worrying about the effect of DDT on chicken eggs or bird eggs, and which it turns out they didn't have that much of an effect. But birds are more important to these people than human beings. And it's estimated that before the DDT ban, according to this Wall Street Journal article, it saved as many as 100 million lives in Africa, Asia, and South America. And get this, on today, the anniversary of the ban, it coincides with the Senate's consideration of implementing legislation introduced by Vermont Senator Jim Jeffords for an international treaty that would further restrict the global use of DDT. Now, DDT is a very, very effective insecticide, and particularly effective in the sense that it's not as costly as other insecticides. We use DDT in our country. We used DDT during World War II, and it saved many lives. And so I think it's rather arrogant of us to say, well, all these poor countries around the world, we're just going to let your people die. There's another story here, folks, in the news today. And yesterday, Republicans pushed legislation through the House granting permanent tax relief to married couples. And they overrode the Democratic complaints that they were draining the Social Security funds to gain an election year advantage. Anyway, the Republicans eliminated the marital tax penalty. Now we see what happens in the Senate. But when you hear these Democrats or hear anybody talk about these tax cuts are draining the Social Security Trust Fund. Look, the Social Security Trust Fund does not have any money in it. Matter of fact, no government trust fund, I don't care whether you're talking about the Highway Trust Fund or the Social Security Trust Fund, they have no money whatsoever in them. And when you hear one of your politicians, one of your elected representatives talking about the trust fund, ask him, could you show me the dollars in the trust fund? Not IOUs, but dollars. Because all the trust fund has in it is IOUs. Matter of fact, you know, Enron has been in the news, and today Arthur Anderson, they're in court. But let's go back to Enron for a moment. Enron has been accused of concealing debt to make the board of directors look good. And it was a huge fraud that they perpetrated on their stockholders and also their employees who had their 401k plans. But Enron's shenanigans pale in comparison to those of the United States Congress. The United States Congress, what they do, they move debt from where it's counted to where it is not counted. And they do it through IOUs. The accounting procedures in Washington would never come close to meeting any of the accounting standards. There's an accounting standards board. It would never come close to meeting any of those standards. Just for one example, look at the unfunded liability of the federal government. And some people say the unfunded liability is somewhere between $16 to $20 trillion. Now, and a lot of that has to do with, it's in pension funds. Now, take a private company who has a pension fund. Now, the law requires it to keep reserves against future claims on the pension fund. That's just standard accounting practice. But nowhere in Washington does Congress have a reserve fund against those massive unfunded liabilities. One day when I substitute for Rush, I'm going to have June O'Neill chat about the Social Security program, because a lot of you people out there, you think that the Social Security program is solvent. Okay, there's something else in the news. And it's in USA Today, and it's Julian Malvo. And the title of it is Juneteenth Reflects Delayed Justice. Juneteenth, is a day when the slaves in Texas found out that they were free. And I believe it was a couple of years after the Emancipation Proclamation. By the way, you know, the Emancipation Proclamation that Abraham Lincoln wrote, it was a bit of, I don't know, it was deceptive at best. That is, the Emancipation Proclamation only freed the slaves in those states that were in rebellion against the United States. Slaves elsewhere were not free. He just did that for, laughs. Anyway, in Julianne Malvo's column, she talks about, Tom Hayden out in California, he spearheaded legislation that required release of information by insurance companies such as New York Life, Aetna, and some others. They had to go back in their records to see whether they insured slaves. Now, this is kind of being held against these companies. But you know, folks, if one had to be a slave, no, but just now, I'm not justifying slavery. I think the slavery is a despicable institution. But if one had to be a slave, he should be a slave in the United States, because slaves were very valuable, and evidence of their value was the very fact that owners were willing to insure them. They didn't insure Irishmen. I mean, and matter of fact, I'll tell you something else. Despite all the rhetoric used about the slaves, a beast, the burden, et cetera, this kind of interesting way that economics tends to bring people to their senses. That is, during slavery, slaves weren't used in canal building, mining, and railroad construction, and other dangerous activities where you can get some kind of disease or you get your limb severed. Why weren't they used? Well, if you had paid $5,000 for a slave, you did not want to see him with his arms cut off or getting sick from yellow fever. So what did you do? You hired an Irishman. And so, you pay the Irishman 25 cents a day, and so if he gets his limbs cut off, you're out of 25 cents. It's not like you're out of $1,000. But anyway, going on with Malvo's column, she says that there's this group, it's called the Reparations Assessment Group, and it's headed by Harvard Law professor Charles Ogletree and high-profile attorneys like Johnny Cochran and Willie Gary. And these guys are going to sue various companies for reparations, and they're not going to get it. They're going to try to get reparations across our country by the government. They're not going to get it. Here's what these guys ought to do. They'd be making a far better contribution if they would sue the rotten public schools in most of our cities whereby too many blacks graduate with openly fraudulent diplomas. They would make a far better contribution. We'll be back with your calls after this.
You're listening to the EIB Network.
We're back, pushing back the frontiers of ignorance. Hey, folks, yesterday I was talking about suits, about mayors in various cities wanting to bring suits against gun manufacturers to make them pay for the cost that cities had to incur because of shootings. It was their vision that gun manufacturers are responsible for the shooting. And then I was also talking about potential suits against food companies because some people say, well, look, obesity is a major problem in our country, and who's responsible for people getting fat? It is the food companies. And I said that these people were emboldened by the cigarette Nazis. That is the success of the cigarette Nazis in getting, saying that tobacco companies were responsible for cancer. Anyway, there's a bit of news from cnsnews.com that that I'm very happy to read. And it says, in Washington State, cigarettes sales have dropped after the voters approved a 60-cent cigarette tax increase, according to the Washington State Economic and Revenue Forecast Council. And sales are down 24%. Maryland raised its cigarette tax by 34 cents. And it's now $1 a pack in Maryland. What's happening, folks, is that while sales are down in Washington State, that doesn't mean that people are smoking less. It means that they're getting their cigarettes from some other source. There's cigarette smuggling in our country. And here's some of the ways it happens. It's like a trucker. He has TV sets on a truck, and he has TV sets around the perimeter of the truck, but cigarettes inside. And so he smuggles them to the various states. Now smugglers are my heroes, because here's what happens. The government says to you or me, is that they say, well, we're going to interfere with peaceable voluntary exchange between you and somebody else, namely, buy cigarettes without people interference. And so what the smuggler comes in and says, aha, I'm going to save you from the oppressive government. He helps you out. Now you say, before you condemn smugglers out there, you all, the framers of our Constitution, some of the signers of the Declaration of Independence, some of them were smugglers. John Hancock was a smuggler. He was saying, the British were saying, well, If you want goods sent from, you want goods from Spain, they had to go in British ships, and they had to go through Britain, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do that. And so these smugglers said, well, heck, we're not going to let you interfere with peaceable voluntary exchange. We're going to say the heck with the navigation acts. Now, those of you out there, you know, there's another issue about this. If cigarette smoking is so harmful, why doesn't the state just outlaw cigarettes? Why don't you just say, no cigarette sales in Maryland? How many of you who are anti-cigarette zealots, how many of you would go for such a law? It seems to me that maybe what people should do, they should sue the government, because the government knows that cigarettes are unsafe, and yet they allow these unsafe, deadly products to be sold on the market. Anyway, let's go to a phone call. Let's welcome Gary from Hastings, Michigan. Welcome to the show, Gary.
Thank you, Doctor. It's a pleasure to speak to you. As I told the gentleman who screened the call, I was reading in the paper today, and to me it's almost like a frustrating final straw regarding Senator Daschle. The House passed, as you probably know, by a wide margin, the marriage tax penalty elimination bill.
Yeah.
And Senator Daschle has said that he is not even going to schedule it for debate. And of course, he's done the same thing with the other issues that affect people, particularly for people who are retired. I knew an elderly couple that they had to divorce because they were losing so much on their Social Security that they divorced while still living together, of course, in order to increase their income so they could survive.
Yeah, it's cheaper to shack up.
Yeah, exactly. And what kind of a moral message are we sending to people in that regard?
Yeah, I think it's tragic. I think that the very fact that we have the kind of incentives that lead people to have to make those kind of decisions.
Well, it's terrible. It's disgusting. But see, the bigger picture is that Senator Daschle is nothing more than the worst probable partisan hack that's come along in a long time. One of the things, if I may briefly, in Texas I heard that the leadership of the Democratic Party in Texas and many independent Democratic office holders have vocally and verbally expressed their dissatisfaction with both Daschle and Gephardt, and they've been asked to attend certain meetings and so forth, and they're not even going to go to them. Yeah,
matter of fact, there's a interesting story in the news today. I'm glad you brought that up. That is the National Dems. It bows out of the Texas convention.
That must be the one that I heard about. Well, if you could elaborate on that a little bit, I'd like to. And did you say something yesterday about putting labels on foods, fat foods?
No.
Warning labels?
No, I said that these people are coming after foods that have who they claim have low nutritional value.
Well, the idea of putting warning labels on food packages, certain fatty foods and sugar and so forth, the cigarette manufacturers have had warning labels for over 20 years. Look what it got them.
Yeah, and I think there ought to be a warning label on Social Security that you may not get your Social Security back. The system is expected to be bankrupt in 2030, and so you are on your own. Social Security is dangerous. We'll be back. Walter Williams sitting in for Rush. By the way, if you're suffering from Rush withdrawal, go to rushlimbaugh.com, and at that site you can order great Father's Day gifts, and actually Father's Day is Sunday. Father's Day gifts such as a subscription to Rush 24/7, something from the Rush collection, or a subscription to the Limbaugh letter that will give you answers to the liberal nonsense. We're holding forth with a lot of goodies in the news that we are considering, and that last caller talking about the convention, he was pointing out that many Texas Democrats are divided on the role of party leaders such as Daschle and Gephardt, whether they should even be at the convention, and they believe that these people are just too liberal. in a conservative-leaning state that is home to George Bush. Folks, Texas, I'm not sure whether Texas is still as conservative or liberty-oriented as it was years ago. I remember back in the 70s, one of the things I loved about going to Texas, and one of the things I loved about Texans, is that you're driving down the road and you see all these pickup trucks with gun racks in the back, with and actually guns there. And I just loved that. And you'd get the feeling when you're in Texas of an incipient rebellion. And that is back in the 70s, when I got back to my home, and turned on the radio, I would not have been surprised to hear, new news, Texas has seceded from the Union. It is a new nation. But I think that Texas has lost some of that spirit. I think you've been led by people like Ann Richards and all these other people that have made you wusses. Anyway, let's go to the back to the phones. Jim from Albany, New York, welcome to the show.
Thank you for taking my call. I have to apologize for being a little nervous.
Oh, no, I'm more nervous than you are.
Well, I admire you so much, and my favorite day of the week is Wednesday when I get to read your column.
Oh, thank you.
Well, the point I wanted to make, and it ties in a bit with what you were talking about with tobacco taxes, is states just outright being in what I call the sin business.
Yeah.
And I used to live in Pennsylvania where the states ran the liquor stores.
Yeah, oh, yeah, my God, yes.
And, I mean, the markup in the taxes and the poor service, it was incredible.
Oh, yes, and by the way, a number of governors have tried to get rid of state-controlled liquor in Pennsylvania, and they've been unsuccessful. And the liquor stores, they charge higher prices in Pennsylvania. They don't have the variety of wines and liquors that, let's say, a place like Washington, D.C. has. And the prices are higher.
Well, the beef I have now is a couple years ago we moved to New York State, and the onslaught in the last year of advertising promoting the New York State lottery. I mean, every time I see it, I'm offended by it.
Well, the lottery is a tax on fools.
You're right, but I mean they're out and out, and the latest barrage of advertising is they're trying to recruit young people. They have kids that look like they're 20. Talking about how much fun it is, it's just $1 a day.
Yeah, well, what you need to do is bring a lawsuit against them for gambling addiction to kids.
Exactly.
I mean, just like the cigarette company is trying to hook kids on cigarettes, quote unquote, the state is trying to hook kids on gambling.
I do not see how they can be talking about caring for the young people and looking out for people's interests, and at the same time hooking them on gambling.
Yeah, they don't care about. And then, by the way, the illegal numbers back in the 40s and 50s, that was a much better payoff than the lottery.
Right.
And then, moreover, your winnings was real money because the IRS didn't know you won something.
There you go.
And so, but however, before you get your money at the state lottery, the state revenue department and the IRS are going to dig their hands in first. So, anyway, thanks a lot for calling. Let's go to Harvey in Gainesville, Florida. Welcome to the show.
Yes, it's a pleasure speaking with you, Professor.
Yeah, well, thank you.
I wanted to bring to light another tax injustice that I don't think has been spoken about or discussed, and that is, remember when Clinton passed his tax increase in '93? That required only 50 votes, and then, of course, Al Gore's deciding vote. Now, fast forward us to 2002, 8 Democrats joined the Republican Party to vote against the vote for making permanent the repeal of the death tax.
Yes.
And they couldn't even get a vote on it. So we had 51 votes to raise our taxes, but now we have 54 in favor of repealing the death tax. And I called one of my senators, and the office said, well, they have to have a supermajority to lower taxes, but they only have to have a simple majority to raise.
That is unfortunate. But even a more important thing about the death tax is that it does far more harm than the little bit of revenue it raises.
Yes,
that is,
exactly.
It's
it's been discussed on other programs. I think a family down here that ran a little business where people would come to vacation. They had a little beach. It's in Florida, in the north central part of the state. They had a little beach, and thousands of people would, well, I would say hundreds of people would come there to spend their vacation time. Well, this family had a loved one pass away, the head of the family, and they could not, with the death tax, afford to keep the business. So what happened? The business disappeared. Those people have no place to go. And we've got to have, again, if you compare it, 51 votes are needed to raise our taxes, 60 are needed to be able to vote on lowering our taxes.
Yeah, but you know, one thing I want to clarify that you said, and a lot of people make a mistake in this way, is that you were referring to the Clinton tax increase.
Yes.
Or you were referring to the George Bush tax cuts. Look, the Constitution says only the United States Congress can raise taxes or appropriate money. Presidents can't do it.
Right.
Presidents can provide leadership. They can veto. They can propose,
well,
but they cannot raise taxes. So any tax increase or decrease is the direct responsibility of the United States Congress.
Yes, exactly. But I'm just again pointing out that Al Gore was there represent. You had Al Gore representing Clinton in there, and he's the vice president is president of the Senate.
Yeah, right. And he breaks ties.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And that's just the big injustice because to raise our taxes, they don't have to have any supermajority, but to lower them, think about that. That is just it's unbelievable.
Well, I think that they should have a supermajority to do anything.
Exactly. It should be
to do anything.
The other way around.
It should be. Matter of fact, I would like to see at least a 75% vote in Congress to do anything. For anything, they have to get it 75% of the people. And what that means simply is that they just wouldn't do very much. Right?
Right.
We people are freer when Congress cannot interfere with our lives. And matter of fact, some years ago, people were saying they were griping about congressmen giving themselves raises. They were saying it's the blah 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 blah, and I wasn't griping at all because I said I would be willing to pay each congressman $10 million a year on the condition that he never set foot in Washington. That is, the harm that they're doing to our country is much more than the little bit of harm that they do by raising their own salaries. So I would much rather see us focus on what Congress does. And also, so far as taxes are concerned, we Americans should not be as concerned with taxes as opposed to federal spending, because the true indicator of government on our lives is government spending, not government taxes. Because, for example, the federal government does not have to tax at all in order to do what it does. You say, well, what do you mean, Williams? All it had to do is operate the printing press. Of course, there'd be a lot of inflation, but so we have to look at spending, because government can tax us to stop us from spending so much privately. They can enter the bond market, or they can print currency to cause inflation. Either one of those measures forces us to spend less privately and more publicly. We'll be back with your calls after this. We're back, and Rush will be back next Monday. And keep in mind, the next hour we're going to have Nobel laureate Milton Friedman, senior fellow at the Hoover Institution, to talk about the Supreme Court's voucher, maybe not the Supreme Court's voucher decision, but vouchers in general, and some of the problems we're having with education, so stay tuned for that. Let's rather than bring up any more news, let's go back to the phones for a few minutes. There's let's see. There's one bit of news here. It's from the Boston Globe, and it said, here's the headline: Heat wave shortens school days in some cities. In other words, because of the heat, some schools are letting kids out early. I don't remember. Now, it could be my brain. My brain could be leaving me because, after all, I'm at the double sixes. But I don't remember back in the 40s kids being let out of school because of hot weather. And matter of fact, we didn't even have air conditioning in the 40s. And also, I don't remember all these snow days. And, you have a little bit of snow and the school's closed. And matter of fact, I tell my students at George Mason University, I tell them that I will be in class come hell or high water at 7:30. I don't care whether it's snowing, hurricanes, tornadoes, you be there because I will be there. And I tell them, if George Washington could make it through Valley Forge with all that snow and cold with no shoes on, many of his men didn't have any shoes on, surely you can do it. I think what we're doing, we're turning into a nation of wimps. That is, we're becoming feminized. That's what's happening. The men in this country are becoming feminized, and they're becoming feminized by the women in this country. And your wives, you guys just don't have control over your household like I do in my household. Matter of fact, you should, when you get married, look, here's one of the tips. I'll give you one tip. When we've been married 42 years. Just a couple weeks ago, we're married 42 years. Just as a sign of respect, I require Mrs. Williams to address me as Dr. Williams. If she wants something, she says, Dr. Williams, may I go out tonight? And I record, but yes, that's right. Mike said, Dr. Williams, can I have my allowance? And, she didn't call me doctor all the time because when we first got married, I was not a doctor. I did not have a PhD. But anyway, I don't have all this informality. I let her call me, in moments of high passion, she can call me Walter. But otherwise, she must address me as doctor. That is tip number 1 on how to raise your wife. Let's go to the phone. Eric from Los Angeles, welcome to the show, Eric.
Yes, Dr. Williams, thanks for taking my call. One of the things I wanted to talk about, and it's a point that I've noticed especially since 9/11, is the fundamental lack of leadership in the Congress and the Senate. It's like right now we're in a wartime situation with a wartime cabinet and president, but the Congress knows nothing about leading or trying to make sacrifices or take this country somewhere and protect it. They're all worried about themselves and how they can coalesce power underneath them. And it's very frustrating to see because you always will hear, we're getting ready to start hearing the campaign speeches, and it's going to be, he has shown leadership in this environment and in this area and in this aspect, and, they haven't led anybody. They're just leading us to chaos. So.
That's right. And I think that, I think that President Bush has been fairly good in providing leadership.
Oh, yes. No, the president and the cabinet are wartime, they're talking about sacrifice and, hey, this is going to be scary and this is going to be tough. And then you've got 500 congressmen and senators laughing, saying, no, you're overblowing it. You're doing this crazy. Yeah. So.
And one of the top people, we should all be happy that Bush won the election because he has some top people with him. Don Rumsfeld, we served on a couple of boards together, and I've known him for a very long time. He is a tough guy.
Right.
And Condoleezza Rice, who is Bush's national security advisor, she is a tough woman. She knows everything about the Soviet Union and the international scene. She knows very, very well. But can you imagine somebody like Gore being the president, and he assigns some of these milquetoast people, and they say to the Taliban, can't we all just get along and trying to find peace and stuff like this rather than going in and wasting them? That would be awful. We'll be back with your calls after this.
You're listening to the EIB Network.
We're back. Walter Williams trying to sell his fellow Americans on the moral superiority of liberty and its main ingredient, limited government. Let's go to the phones and welcome Pete from Glen Burnie, Maryland. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Dr. Williams. It's a real honor to speak with you. Just wanted to say on behalf of millions of your fans here how much we enjoy listening to you.
Well, thank you.
You're a genius. And we're hoping that maybe you'll seek elective office, perhaps the president. That would be really fantastic.
Well, you know, I'm flattered. People say, "Well, Williams, why don't you run for the presidency? Why don't you run for the Senate?" and I tell people that to win high office in America, one has to rise above principle and do the right thing. And I'm not ready for such a heady trek. I mean, I could never make it to the presidency. Imagine that, you know, I'm campaigning for the presidency of the United States, and I tell fellow Americans, look, I've read the Constitution of the United States, and if Congress sends me a bill for prescription drugs, I'm going to veto it because it's not in the Constitution. If they send me a bill for farm handouts, I'm going to veto it because it's not in the Constitution. Aid to higher education, Meals on Wheels. Do you think I would make it to office?
Well, perhaps your honesty would ring resonance with the majority of people. They'd say, well, this man is stating what he believes, and he's putting principle above political expedience.
Oh, yeah. And how do you think that would go over, let's say, with the farm community in our country?
Well, the farm community, maybe they would begin to look at alternates and say maybe we shouldn't be on the dole here. Perhaps there are alternate means of, being profitable, running a profitable
Well, see, look, you know, the only way, this is a tragic observation about my fellow Americans, the only way that you can win office in our country is to promise your constituents that you will take the rightful property of one American and bring it back to them. That is, you will engage in legalized theft. Now, and Americans are behaving correctly in one sense, because if Maryland doesn't get it, that means that Virginia gets it. So thanks for the suggestion. Next hour, we're going to have Milton Friedman. He's a Nobel laureate, research fellow at the Hoover Institution, and author of numerous research pieces and books, and the greatest economist of the 20th century. Stay tuned. We're back. Walter Williams trying to sell his fellow Americans on the moral superiority of liberty and its main ingredient, limited government. Let's go to the phones and welcome Pete from Glen Burnie, Maryland. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Dr. Williams. It's a real honor to speak with you. Just wanted to say on behalf of millions of your fans here how much we enjoy listening to you.
Well, thank you.
You're a genius. And we're hoping that maybe you'll seek elective office, perhaps the president. That would be really fantastic.
Well, you know, I'm flattered. People say, "Well, Williams, why don't you run for the presidency? Why don't you run for the Senate?" and I tell people that to win high office in America, one has to rise above principle and do the right thing. And I'm not ready for such a heady trek. I mean, I could never make it to the presidency. Imagine that, you know, I'm campaigning for the presidency of the United States, and I tell fellow Americans, look, I've read the Constitution of the United States, and if Congress sends me a bill for prescription drugs, I'm going to veto it because it's not in the Constitution. If they send me a bill for farm handouts, I'm going to veto it because it's not in the Constitution. Aid to higher education, Meals on Wheels. Do you think I would make it to office?
Well, perhaps your honesty would ring resonance with the majority of people. They'd say, well, this man is stating what he believes, and he's putting principle above political expedience.
Oh, yeah. And how do you think that would go over, let's say, with the farm community in our country?
Well, the farm community, maybe they would begin to look at alternates and say maybe we shouldn't be on the dole here. Perhaps there are alternate means of, being profitable, running a profitable
Well, see, look, You know, the only way, this is a tragic observation about my fellow Americans. The only way that you can win office in our country is to promise your constituents that you will take the rightful property of one American and bring it back to them. That is, you will engage in legalized theft. Now, and Americans are behaving correctly in one sense, because if Maryland doesn't get it, that means that Virginia gets it. So thanks for the suggestion. Next hour, we're going to have Milton Friedman. He's a Nobel laureate, research fellow at the Hoover Institution, and author of numerous research pieces and books, and the greatest economist of the 20th century. Stay tuned.
And now, Black by popular demand. Once again, it's that great American, that great economist, an all-around nice guy. Not to mention America's heartthrob.
Oh, Walter.
Walter E. Williams.
Thank you, Johnny Donovan. Look, folks, we are delighted to have my next guest. He is Professor Milton Friedman. He's the senior fellow at the Hoover Institution, a Nobel laureate. He's done fabulous research. He has books and papers out. Matter of fact, there's an excellent book you might want to check out. It's at Two Lucky People, and you can get it either at laissezfaire.com or either Amazon.com. Welcome to the show, Milton.
Glad to be on it, Walter.
Before we get to the real subject that I wanted to talk to you about, educational vouchers, because the Supreme Court is coming up, will be coming out with a decision fairly soon. But what do you think about the Bush administration tariffs to save jobs in the steel industry, and their farm subsidies, a massive farm bill to save family farms?
I think both of them are serious mistakes. The steel thing is really hilarious if it weren't so serious. Back in 1790-something, Alexander Hamilton wrote a report called The Report on Manufactures, a very famous report, in which he talked about the virtues of free trade, but said that there were exceptions that had to be made. And one of those exceptions was the steel industry, because it was an infant industry and needed to be encouraged until it could stand on its own feet.
Mm-hmm.
Now that's more than that. That's a long time ago, more than 2 centuries ago.
That's right.
But steel apparently is still an infant, which still has to be helped until it can stand on its own feet.
Uh-huh.
It's disgraceful.
Yes.
We with one hand, we try to preach free trade around the world. We tell the underdeveloped countries that they'll be a lot better off if they don't try to restrict the entry of products. And then with the other hand, we shut off the trade that would benefit.
Mm-hmm.
It's a thoroughly inconsistent policy.
Yes, yeah.
And that's even more important in connection with the Farm Bill, because agriculture is an area and is a field in which many underdeveloped countries can perfectly well compete in the world market. Moreover, the main benefits of the Farm Bill go to agribusiness, not to individual family farms,
mm-hmm.
but to very large businesses. And the people who pay for it are the ordinary consumers.
Mm-hmm.
It's incredible.
It's a perverse income redistribution from lower income people to higher income people.
Absolutely. It's one of the worst of those.
Uh-huh.
All sorts of things stand out. Here we have sugar quotas on sugar, which mean that the domestic price of sugar is what, 3 times the world price?
Yes.
Something like that. Who's paying that? It's all of the ordinary families around the country. And who's benefiting from it? A few large farmers who grow sugar.
That's right. You know, it's perverse, and I wish we could find some way to get the president to come to his senses.
He's doing such a good job on the war on terrorism. His leadership has been excellent on that.
Mm-hmm.
But these movements on tariffs and farm relief really go against the war on terrorism. You know, there are no terrorists in free countries. Every country that is a supporter of terrorism is a country which does not have economic freedom, which does not participate in the world economy. And one of the ways to undermine the basis for terrorism is to promote and spread free trade and free economy.
Yeah, and as a result, prosperity as well.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, let's turn to the educational vouchers. Let's start off with this question: what do you think are the most important elements of our education problem in America?
Well, there's no question in my mind what's the most important element. It's the lack of competition. It's the fact that for close to 90% of all kids, they go to government schools which have a monopoly, which can require them to attend. Ordinarily, a business enterprise has to appeal to customers. It has to attract people. You choose whom you're going to buy from. But in the case of schools, it's the other way around. The school tells you that you're its customer and have no choice. It's just the opposite. And there's no doubt in my mind that that's the most important problem, is the lack of competition because of the particular status.
Now, some people will say, Milton, that, let's say at the time that you were going to elementary and high school, you, meaning you, Milton Friedman, the schools were pretty good.
That's right, but there was a big difference. When I graduated from high school in 1928, a very long time ago, there were 150,000 school districts in the United States. Today, with a population that's twice as large as it was then, there are only 15,000 schools, roughly 15,000 school districts, 1/10 as much. So what's happened is that you had more competition then because of more local control. You had smaller school districts, and you had local citizens in it. Moreover, you did not have teachers' unions at that time. In many of the features of deterioration in the U.S. school system date from about the middle 60s. And the reason for that is that until the middle 60s, the National Education Association was a professional association like the American Medical Association, the American Bar Association. In 1965, it converted itself into a trade union. And that really marks the point at which you started to have declining SAT scores, declining performance.
Now, there's some people who will say, many people who say, politicians and many Americans say, well, what we need is smaller classes and more money.
Yes, of course. They've been saying that for many years, but we have to look at the facts. The amount of money per student, after correcting for inflation, has been going up steadily over time. And the product, the output, has not been. We're spending more and getting less. It's a fine panacea. Everything else the same. Of course, more money will produce better results. But everything else is not the same. The more money doesn't go into classes. In many of our state schools, government schools, teachers account for, the classroom accounts for less than half the total expenditure.
Yeah.
What you have, the situation is that those among us who can afford to pay twice for educating our children have effective choice. We can send our children to a private school because we pay tuition for the private school, we pay taxes for the government school. But the people, especially the low-income people in the large cities, they're the ones who are hurt worst by this because they find it very difficult. They cannot afford to pay twice for schooling their children.
And so a voucher system that you've proposed way back when I guess it was Capitalism and Freedom.
Yes, it was even before that, 1955.
But explain to the audience what a voucher system would do.
Well, the government today says to any young child, if you go to a government school, we're willing to spend roughly $8,000 to $10,000 a year on your schooling. But if you go to a private school, no money for you.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that seems to me to be wrong. If the government is willing to spend $10,000, $8,000 per child, why should it insist that money be spent in a government school?
Mm-hmm.
When the government gives out food stamps, it doesn't require that those food stamps be spent in a government grocery store.
Mm-hmm.
Just think of what would happen if it did. What do you think would happen to those grocery stores?
We would be just as dissatisfied with food as we are with education.
We sure would be.
And I think
so that situation is one which has prevented competition from arising. The reason why most private schools are parochial is that, it's kind of hard to compete to sell something when somebody down the street is giving it away for free.
Uh-huh.
And churches and parochial groups have been about the only ones around who were able and willing to subsidize their schooling, and so they sell it at a relatively low cost, below cost.
Mm-hmm.
And yet they're very much in demand.
Mm-hmm.
My wife and I have been involved in this issue for 50 years now.
Oh, matter of fact, you have the Rose and the Milton Friedman Foundation.
Yes, we recently decided that we were getting too old to be very effective, so we did establish a foundation, which I'm very happy to say has been spreading the word and trying to provide information
Uh-huh.
and to help promote parental choice in schooling.
Mm-hmm. Milton, we have to stop right now to make some money, but when we come back, I would like for you to perhaps answer the question. There are some of us or some people will say that vouchers will just lead to more spread of government into private schools, and they see that as a criticism.
Well, that is a criticism,
yes.
But I'll be glad to talk on that.
Thank you very much. We'll be back with your calls to Professor Milton Friedman after this.
You're listening to the EIB Network.
We're back, folks, and we're on with Professor Milton Friedman. And matter of fact, a month ago, Professor Milton Friedman was honored at the White House with a reception and lunch with the President of the United States. And in attendance were people like Greenspan, Gary Becker, and Lawrence Lindsay, Don Rumsfeld, and yours truly. It was an excellent honor to a brilliant man. And has your birthday come yet?
No, it's not till July 31st. That was a little premature.
Well, anyway, a happy premature birthday from the Rush audience.
Well, thank you.
Now, I left you with the question, how much of a danger will vouchers, the Supreme Court says that vouchers are constitutional, how much of a danger do vouchers pose to the spread of government control over non-government schools?
Very little. First of all, non-government schools are now subject to government control because of the existence of compulsory schooling. It's the compulsory schooling that really provides the government with the clout.
Mm-hmm.
And indeed, one of the problems in schooling is compulsory schooling, keeping kids in school beyond an age at which they would be better off in the market.
Mm-hmm.
At any rate, so that you now have control. I do not see any real reason why there should be much additional control.
Mm-hmm.
You may want to make a big distinction. If money goes to the institutions, there would be the control. If government money were going to go directly to school A or school B, that would raise the control.
Yeah.
But if government money goes to the parents, for the parents to choose a school for their children, that's the same way as food stamps.
Yeah.
The fact that the government provides food stamps doesn't provide the government with more control over the grocery stores.
Mm-hmm.
And this would be the same thing. If you provide money to parents and the parents choose, that breaks the link.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's another argument that people will give. They'll say, well, even if vouchers are a good idea, there are not enough private schools right now to be able to accommodate all those people who would be freed up from the public schools by vouchers.
The market is wonderful. It reacts very quickly. If there's a demand, the supply will be there.
Uh-huh.
If you just look at an area like the growth in computers, there was nobody producing a computer 20 years, or very few 20 years ago. But when the demand rose, the market came.
Yeah.
And the same thing is true here. You're not going to have 100% of kids jump immediately out of the public schools. There are good public schools.
Mm-hmm.
There's no question of the problem is that there are too many bad ones.
Yeah.
Especially, as we said, in the low-income areas.
And matter of fact, I have a relationship with a number of schools in low-income areas. My wife and I, we give scholarships, and they are private, and they're private schools. And at those private schools, such as Marcus Garvey in Los Angeles, and Ivy Leaf in Philadelphia, and Marva Collins in Cincinnati, at those private schools, that they are, they're founded by black people and they're run by black people, and they take no government money. Those kids from low and moderate income families, female-headed households, at some of the schools, 95% of the kids are at, and sometimes up 6 years above grade level.
Oh, I'm sure that's true.
Mm-hmm.
Competition and free choice makes all the difference in the world.
Mm-hmm.
It's not only in education, but in every area. That's what's really been the secret of American success. And, it's interesting. You ask yourself, can you name any other industries that are as technologically backward as schooling? We teach kids in schools the same way they taught them 200 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
That was pretty good for 200 years ago.
Right.
But there's no other area in which we do things the same as we did then.
Uh-huh.
And that's because this has been subject to monopolistic control. There hasn't been competition. There hasn't been free entry. There hasn't been the opportunity for innovation. And if you now were to give parents control, the Supreme Court decision, which has to do with whether the Cleveland voucher program discriminates on ground of religion, because currently most of the schools to which kids can go in Cleveland on that voucher program are parochial, are religious. But the reason for that is because of the small size of the voucher.
It's about $2,000, isn't it?
Yes, it's just a little over $2,000.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not a very, very large amount to pay for the cost.
Mm-hmm.
So the only schools that can afford to take voucher kids are parochial schools that have subsidies from the church.
Mm-hmm.
But if you made that voucher not $2,000 but $5,000 or $6,000, I can assure you that there would be plenty of non-religious private schools.
Uh-huh. Yeah, make it equivalent to what the state or near equivalent what the state and county government spends for the government schools.
Oh, they spend something like $6,000 or $7,000 or $8,000.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to make it fully equivalent. We know one thing from a lot of evidence: anything government does, private enterprise can do for half the cost.
That's absolutely right, and it's very interesting also, Milton, that if you look at some sectors of our economy, costs and prices are going down, whereby the government sector of the costs and prices are going up.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, Milton, thanks a lot for joining us and giving some of your ideas about the voucher system and the educational problems in the country. And what odds do you think that Supreme Court will rule in favor of vouchers?
Well, I'm very optimistic and very hopeful.
Yeah.
I've read the transcript of the oral testimony before the judges,
mm-hmm.
and that sounds very promising. But the Supreme Court is a law unto itself.
That's right.
And personally, while
we're up against the clock, Milton. But thank you very much. We just can't do anything else. Sorry. We're back, folks. Walter Williams and Rush will be back on Monday. We just had the honor of chatting with Professor Milton Friedman. Kind of interesting story about Milton Friedman. I forget the year, but I was a graduate student at UCLA, and maybe it was 1968 or 69, and Milton Friedman came out for a semester, and he took he taught a class, and I was kind of interested in the class, but I was afraid to take it for credit. Um, I sat in on the class. I kind of chickened out. And by the way, at that time, UCLA was I think it was ranked number 10 or 11th for economics departments, and we were called the Chicago Farm Team. That is, there were three schools that kind of maybe shared professors, at least shared the same ideology on free markets, and that was University of Chicago, where Milton Friedman was, and the University of Virginia and UCLA. But we surely enjoyed, and I even attended a debate he had, and I believe it was with a Professor Campbell over educational vouchers, and this was in the 60s. And UCLA back then was an excellent school to go to. And matter of fact, I am glad that I went to UCLA because, and as I said yesterday, for those of you who listened yesterday, I said that I am very happy that I got my education before it became fashionable for white people to like black people. And at UCLA, they were tough. They didn't give a damn whether you were a polka dot or not. You know, I remember when I took the PhD exams, the written exams, and it could be 1969 or 68. I think 15 or 16 people took the exam, and 13 flunked. And when the professors came around to talk to me, they said, Williams, your exam was among the worst. And so they gave me a whole lot of stuff to read, and they read me the Riot Act, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, I took the exam again, and I passed. But UCLA didn't play any games. By the way, talking about vouchers and school choice, you get a lot of politicians, and they will say things like, we have to save our public schools. We can't just abandon them. Now, here's a story by the Washington Times, today's Washington Times, and it's a survey done by the Heritage Foundation. Yeah, I believe Rush is going to have an interview with Ed Fulner in a forthcoming Limbaugh letter. Anyway, the Heritage Foundation, they did a survey, and they found out that 47% of House members and 51% of senators send their children to private schools. Now, these are the people, let's say, they go on and say 69 of 273 House members who last year voted against legislation allowing children in low-income schools, low-performing, and dangerous schools to send schools of choice. But they've sent their children to private schools. Then you have 35% of Congressional Black Caucus members and 33% of Congressional Hispanic members, they send their kids to private schools. A national poll conducted last year by the joint, I'm still looking at the Washington Times article, by the Joint Center for Political and Economic Studies, which is a leading black policy, public policy think tank, they found that 60% of blacks nationally support school vouchers, whereby 69% of black elected officials oppose vouchers. That is, you have Jesse Jackson, he will send his kids to the most elite schools in Washington, St. Albans, and he will come out and lobby against school vouchers. And by the way, another little tidbit, that I think in some cities, close to 50% of school teachers, of public school teachers, have their kids in private schools. That ought to tell you something, folks. I mean, it's like I say to you, look, I'm going to take you to a restaurant tonight, and you find that the restaurant I'm taking you to, the chef does not eat there, the busboys and the animals don't eat there. That suggests that they may have some inside information from which you might benefit. Let's go to the phones, and we have Mike in Dallas, Texas. Welcome to the show, Mike.
Hi, welcome, Dr. Williams. Thank you. I've been a big fan ever since I heard you speak in college. I have a question about school vouchers in rural areas. Vouchers, to me, always seem to make a great deal of sense in urban areas where there's a greater population and people are more mobile and they, more people to support more schools. What about in rural areas where it might take, where there are, fewer kids?
Well, in rural areas, do they have supermarkets?
Sure, but there might only be one in a town.
Yeah.
And so there might only be room for, say, one school in a town that could be 50 miles away from the next town that could support another school.
Well, I would suggest that see, the vouchers, if they're vouchers, it does not mean that public schools are going to disappear. It means that parents will have choice. Now, if the public school in the rural area is not supplying services that the parent wants, I would imagine that a private school would emerge, and so it might not be as convenient as the public school in terms of distance. But if parents want it bad enough, they'll be successful.
So it sounds like it just might take longer to achieve.
Yeah, I mean, I sometimes
in an urban area.
Sometimes I hear people say that the post office people say, well. Oh, well, we will, the reason why we have this government postal service is because if it were privatized, people would skim and they'd just provide mail to the urban areas, and the rural people would not get the mail because, we deliver mail to everybody. Well, you drive along the rural areas of our country, and you see those little boxes below the mailbox. They're newspaper boxes. Somebody delivers the newspapers, that person could also be contracted to deliver the mail. These are self-serving arguments. Remember when we were talking about deregulation of airlines? And people were saying, well, look, if airlines are deregulated, people in the boondocks and rural areas, they'd be stuck. Well, have you seen people stuck in the rural areas because they could not get flights out? It would make the news. I mean, have you seen it on the news? No, it's just these are self-serving arguments. The free market is ingenious in supplying any object of desire. Let's go to Dave. Welcome to the show, Dave from Chicago, Illinois.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Williams. It's an honor to speak to you.
Thank you.
I teach high school in Chicagoland area, and I've been a teacher for 6 years in the public schools. And I've seen the standards drop dramatically. And one of the reasons I see a lot of things contributing to this, and one of them is parents think that all their kids deserve A's now. And when I fail a student justly, the parents come in, they have a conference with the administration, and they force us to change their grade.
Mm-hmm.
And I had one example where I teach American government, and I'm the only conservative that does. And in the last year, I had 3 seniors that failed. And I told them, okay, they're not going to graduate if they don't pass my class. And I gave them a basic competency test. Okay, you pass this, you move on to better things. They couldn't even tell me the 3 branches of government and their functions. And the administration forced me to pass them.
Mm-hmm.
It's dramatic. The parents are causing a lot of the problems in public education. They demand things. They demand that their kids get A's or passing grades, and then they make excuses if they don't. Oh, my kid doesn't take tests well, or my child has ADD.
Well, look,
something like that.
Look, Dave. Now, imagine if there were a voucher system.
I'm for vouchers.
And let's say, and teachers like yourself can set up your own schools and have your own criteria for graduating, own criteria for admissions, and set up the procedure. You would be free from the bureaucracy. You could be a principal of a school.
That would be wonderful.
Yeah.
But it doesn't help that colleges like the University of Chicago are getting rid of their Western civilization courses, which is they're just dumbing down education all around in high schools everywhere.
Well, that's I don't know what to do about it other than say our solution is to try to privatize things. We'll be back with more of your calls after this. We're back. Walter Williams substituting for Rush. He'll be back on Monday, as you just heard. When we were talking to Professor Milton Friedman about vouchers, something else came up which we did not mention, and it came up during last week's conversation with Professor Thomas Sowell talking about, in his I interviewed him about his book, Basic Economics. And that is the market allocation of resources tends to reduce conflict, and government allocation of resources tends to enhance conflict. Let's look at the school issue. Now, you have some parents who want their kids to say prayers in school, and I think that that's their right. And we have other parents who think their kids should not say prayers in school, and that too is their right. But when you have government schools, it's going to either be prayers or no prayers. Okay, so what it means is that the parent that wants her kid to say prayers in school, she has to enter into conflict with the parent who does not want to have prayers in school. And she knows it's a zero-sum game. She knows that if she loses, her kids are not going to say prayers in school, or she's going to have to send their kids to a private school and continue to pay for a school for which she has no use. And so now if there's a voucher system, as proposed long ago by Professor Milton Friedman, if there's a voucher system where the government says, okay, there's a case can be made for public financing of schools. I have some questions about that, but I'm willing to concede it. But there's absolutely no case for government production of schools. And you see that. There's a case for government financing of F-14s, but there's no government F-14 factory. That is, we let the private sector produce it and the government finance it. Now, if there were vouchers, and so if there was a voucher system, and I want my kid to say prayers in school, I send them to a school that says prayers. You don't want your kid to have prayers in school, you send them to school that doesn't have prayers. And we don't have to fight each other. We can play tennis in the afternoon. We could be friends. But with the current system, we have to enter into conflict with one another. And that's a great benefit that's often ignored about free markets. Let's go to Marty from Oakland, New Jersey. Welcome to the show, Marty.
Dr. Williams, good afternoon, sir.
Hi.
I have a comment and a question. The public school system, by any yardstick you care to use, is an abject failure. And there are so many politicians who have a vested interest in this failure because the teachers' unions have enormous political clout. And as with all unions, they vote as a block. They know from whence their bread is buttered. How do you possibly get around this?
I don't know. One way to get around the unions is to have a voucher system.
But the people that would be in the position to make this possible are the ones that are, getting all of this political hay out of the present failed system.
Well, that's one of the reasons why the teachers' union is they're fighting tooth and nail against having a voucher system, because they recognize that will weaken some of their control over the government schools.
Absolutely.
So that's the answer to your question. But thanks a lot for calling in. Let's go to, let's say, Kathy on a cell phone in Virginia. Welcome to the show.
How are you, Dr. Williams?
Okay.
The reason I was calling, I totally agree with voucher system. I think it would be a great asset to have. But what I had called about was some of the problems that go along with schooling. We have parents in our district who I send rubrics home, and for anybody that doesn't know what that is, that's basically setting it out with exactly what I expect of a student to do in order to get an A on whatever the project or paper or whatever it is that I've assigned.
Mm-hmm.
And I did that. I do science. I had science fair. I sent the stuff home 2 months in advance. And when everything came in and got graded, I had a parent call and just raked me over the coals about how I graded their students poorly because they were poor and didn't have the money to buy the supplies and to do, a wonderful job and everything. And it had absolutely nothing to do with what the child had done the science fair project on.
Might I ask, what did you do?
Luckily I have an excellent administration, and went into with the administrator, showed them the work, showed them the rubrics, and they totally backed me up on it.
Mm-hmm.
But we get that a lot. I assigned at the 1st of May. We had 6 weeks of school left at that point, and I assigned some things that had to be done between then and the end of school. And I had a parent call and say, I can't believe you're assigning this much work. We have ball, we have soccer, we have all these things. And it was like, it was my problem that I had this much material to cover and that I am still teaching. That's my job till the end of school. And yet, I was infringing on their sport.
And that is amazing to me. Well, many things I see today are amazing but when I was going to school, I cannot conceive of a parent wanting to do that.
It happens quite frequently. You'd be amazed. We have parents that before Christmas, we sent home letters saying that their child was in danger of failing because they had not completed work. And you would think that would get them in gear, and these children would not be doing anything except school, because these are not students who are mentally incapable of doing the work. These were students who just weren't completing work. Nothing happened. We got phone calls, oh yes, we're going to take care of it. Right before spring break, we sent letters out to basically the same parents again. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the year, these same students failed.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm not quite sure what can be done. Other than, again, privatizing schools. We'll be back with your calls after this. We're back. When Kathy from Virginia was on with us, just the last caller, I was thinking about when I was going to school, all the flack that she was getting from parents. I was, I remember I used to come home for lunch and when I was in high school. And one day I came home for lunch and I brought my report card home with me. And I had a C in science. My mother was livid. She walked me to school, back to school, to talk to the teacher. And, and being 16 with your mother going to school, that is punishment in and of itself. Anyway, she went up to the teacher to ask about this C in science, and the teacher said, well, he was throwing airplanes in class. And she told the teacher, I promise that won't happen again. And she canceled all of my privileges until the next report card came out and I had improved the grade. Now, today, my mom might be arrested. She might be arrested. Fortunately, my mom's still living. She's 91. She's 1 year older than Milton Friedman. And I think she's living so long because she has a great son.
And now, here he is, substituting for the vacationing Rush Limbaugh, not missing a beat, pushing back the frontiers of ignorance at the Institute for Excellence in Broadcasting, the one and only, impossible to be cloned, regardless of federal funding, Walter E. Williams.
That's right, Johnny Donovan. I know that I need to be cloned because where else can you find such intelligence, such handsomeness, and such high-spiritedness, and just all-around wonderful. Anyway, let's continue. We had Professor Milton Friedman on the show, and those of you who weren't tuned in, you missed it. But however, you can get it again if you subscribe. If you're a subscriber to Rush 24/7. There's another issue here. It's kind of related to school. And it's an article written by Sally Pipes of the Independent Institute. Is based in on the left coast of the United States. And the article is PC Superstition on Campus. And here's a tragedy. She says, unknown before 1970, there are now 900 women's study programs on universities across the campus, including 15 that give doctoral doctoral programs that award PhD degrees. And they're taught nonsense. This is just, women's studies is just propaganda. It has no genuine scholarship whatsoever. They teach women, for example, they teach women that that science and medicine are an outgrowth of male culture. Now, Sally Pipes says, that would have surprised Madame Curie, who's the only two-time Nobel laureate. They teach women propaganda such as women are shortchanged in medical research. As it happens that women are 60% of all subjects in clinical trials funded by the National Institutes of Health. And they say, well, they teach women, young ladies, that, well, the society discriminates against health problems of women. And it turns out that since 1985, more money has been spent on breast cancer research than any other cancer research. She goes on to say that in not a single chapter in any women's studies textbook describes marriage as a good thing. In fact, marriage emerges as a major cause of mental illness in women. And there's this kook out in Chicago, I forget, Catherine McKinnon. She says that all sexual intercourse is rape. Consensual, it's nonetheless rape. These are some of the things that go on college campus that you as a taxpayer are paying for. And with women's studies, there's absolutely no scholarship, but just an axis of feminist superstition and victim mentality and anti-male demonology. It's home for what Rush calls, and I think I'll begin calling them too, the same thing, it's home for the feminazis. And this happens at many campuses, even at my campus, George Mason University. They have a women's study. I haven't found out about it, but I'm probably not their hero. They have other half-baked programs. Let's say, can you imagine a program in the course called HIV/AIDS awareness? Students getting 3 units for that, 3 credits for that, or Habitat for the Humanity. These are actual classes taught in some of our colleges. Now, I'll tell you why it goes on, or at least one of the reasons why it goes on or why it doesn't stop. It's a kind of let me see, how can I say it? Let me go back. Americans are the most generous people on the face of this earth. We give money to this, we give money to that, we tax ourselves to do this and do that. Now, but we're lazy in our generosity. Now, this nonsense that goes on in college campuses, it would stop if Americans would begin to tell college presidents that, look, we are not giving any money to your university because you have nonsense going on there. As a matter of fact, if I had my way, I think Americans in general should just stop giving money to universities altogether. And now that's not saying that there are not some particular programs at some universities that are deserving of your generosity, but you need to stop being lazy and go out and find people at universities who are doing good work or who have excellent programs and make your contributions to them. And moreover, the people who are doing work and are probably conducting excellent programs, they are probably under siege by the administration. See what we have in college campuses today. We have the hippies and flower children of the 60s and 70s, they are now the presidents, the deans, and provosts, and the professors of college campuses today. That is what we have. We just have some grown-up hippies to a significant degree teaching our courses, and we ought to cut the purse strings to them. And now there's another issue that comes up, it's kind of related to education, and we were talking about education last hour, and part of the problem with education in America is that the many teachers themselves are not educated. That is, teachers themselves have not mastered 9th and 10th grade reading, writing, and arithmetic. Now you say, Williams, what are you talking about? Well, let's look at some teacher certification tests. Now there's one in California. It's called the California Basic Education Skills Test. And the people who are going to be teachers, they have to pass this test. And the test questions ought to be answered by an 8th grader. You say, well, what kind of test questions do they have? Let me just give you a couple. I've mentioned on the show before, but some of you might not have been around. Some of the test questions for prospective teachers. One test question, and you might have the answer to it. One test question is, Monday, it's a multiple choice. Monday is what fraction of the week? 1/7, 1/10, 1/5, or 1/7, or 1/15. Did I say 7 twice? Okay, let me. I'm having trouble with Rush's help. I don't know why they don't cooperate with me when I'm up here. I think it has something to do with my hue. But anyway, let me read the question again. Monday is what fraction of the week? 1/5, 1/7, 1/15, or 1/30th? That's one of the questions on the California Basic Education Test. Another question is, and you can check this out just by going to the internet and looking at the California Basic Education Test. 4 times a number plus 4 equals 32. What is that number? That's another test question for teachers. Now, you expect an 8th grader to know the answers to these questions. Now, what happens? Now, how do these people become teaching majors? Well, they went to college and they took the major in teaching. And one of the problems, one of the solutions to education in this country, and my colleague Tom Sowell, I think he agrees with me, or he might have originated in the first place. He says one of the best things you can do for education in America is close down the schools of education. Because at schools of education, the students who major in education, they get the lowest SAT scores on any major on college campus, and the professors at the school of education, they are held in the lowest esteem of any other professors on campus. That is, schools of education at various college campuses, probably at most college campuses, represent the intellectual slums of the college. And the best thing we could do is just shut down schools of education. We'll be back with your calls after this.
You're listening to the EIB Network. 4-7.
We're back, Walter Williams, pushing back the frontiers of ignorance. Let's go to the phone. We have Joan on a cell phone from Chicago, Illinois. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks.
You're on.
Okay. Well, I take issue with the call you said.
I can't quite hear you. You're breaking up.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm on cell phone. I take issue with a couple of things that you're talking about. First, the women's studies courses. It just seems like you pulled out a few facts, and you pulled out a few facts from things that people might have said, but I really don't think that you're representing what those women's studies programs are about.
Now, and would you pray tell us what it's about? I mean, they use text. Now, do you believe, as Catherine McKinnon would say, and it's used in the women's studies courses, that all sexual intercourse is rape?
Not at all.
Well, that's stupid, isn't it?
Of course it's not, and that's not what's taught in those programs.
Oh, okay. Well, here's
I've taken those programs. No, there was never an issue. That was never brought up in one of those.
Wait a minute. Here's a textbook that's used in major. Here's a major women's studies textbook describes marriage in the following way: it emerges as a cause of mental illness in women. One text portrays fathers as foreign male element in the home. This guy from there's a fellow from Professor Charlin at Johns Hopkins University. He says that women don't need men. Women don't need the fathers. I'm sorry. He said children do not need fathers. They need the father's money.
Well,
and so what they're saying is that a welfare check is a substitute for a father.
How many schools really use that book, though? I mean, I think that anyone with common sense wouldn't believe that statement. And from the program that I took, there was common sense. Nothing like that would have ever been said in that program. I mean, it just seems like you took a few examples that sounded really bad, but I just don't think that that's representative
let's say,
of the program.
Well,
for instance,
for your information,
the medical. The thing about the medical, the point that they're trying to prove is most medical tests were done on men, and the reason that they were done on men is because they don't have as many hormonal issues as women do.
But it says
because that gets in the way of their testing. That can throw off their test. But the thing is, so a lot of medical tests, the majority of them were done on men, but the same results in men were not. They weren't addressing women's issues.
Well, look, according to Sally Pipes, she says that 60% of all subjects in clinical trials funded by the National Institutes of Health are women.
Okay, so then what's wrong with that?
No, nothing's wrong with that. But when they say that medical research ignores women, that's just plain wrong.
Well, that's probably because women have brought that issue to the forefront, and they've obviously made a lot of
a lot of progress.
But it wouldn't have happened if it wasn't brought up.
A lot of progress. But thank you very much for calling in. Let's go to Jim in Cleveland, Ohio. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dr. Williams.
Hi.
Actually, I wanted to give you a tidbit that would sort of confirm a comment you made earlier, and then offer a reason why education tends to attract, as you say, it doesn't give us the best and the brightest. The Miller's analogy, I'm certain you're familiar with that test that's used for graduate admission at various colleges around the country.
Yeah.
Predominantly, it's for education and social sciences. The score chart that's given to students who actually take the exam would indicate that the average score for education majors is the lowest average mean score for all subject areas, all majors.
Yeah.
That confirms what you say, that we are not attracting the best and the brightest in the field of education. Now, again, you can offer an explanation as to why that is the case. The fact is that education is one of the lower paying jobs that a person can get into.
No, I don't believe that. I don't believe that. Look, I think that you'll be playing when you say that you're probably right with your reasoning, but you are playing in the hands of the educational establishment. Let me ask the question. Now, who do you think are paid the higher wage? Teachers who teach in private schools and parochial schools or public schools?
That's a good question. I would say that probably
it's public schools.
Public schools, because you have the unions behind
It's the public schools. Where do you think is the higher quality education?
Probably in the private schools.
Okay, so what I'm saying is that the pay that teachers are getting is not necessarily related to the quality of teacher that you get.
I was speaking of comparing it to other fields.
And so, no, teachers, I think, like, let's say, I believe in Montgomery County, Pennsylvania, if you add all the fringes, the fringe benefits that teachers are getting, plus the money pay, comes to somewhere around $70,000 to $75,000 a year.
Is that for an established teacher with many years of experience?
No, not many. Let's say a new teacher, I'm not sure of the numbers, but the new teacher coming in, I would bet my life on it, that's fairly close to $50,000 with fringes and benefits.
The salaries in public schools here in the Cleveland, Ohio area, the suburbs, generally 30 to 32,000 to start. So it's not a great wage.
But do you include the look? First, you talk about teaching 9 months out of the year.
This is true.
And then if you make that on an annualized basis, it's going to come up higher than that. Then you're talking about dental plans. Then you're talking about medical plans. Then you're talking about vacation pay and things like that will run it up to much more than $30,000 a year.
Certainly, it's not a lie to say that other majors, as in engineering, science, any business field, accounting, tends to pay more right off the bat
but then again,
higher wage.
If you made teaching $75,000 a year, I don't think that would increase the quality of people who go into teaching anyway. That is, well, let me go back. The feasible amount that you could raise salaries would not attract the high-quality people into teaching. Matter of fact, Einstein could not teach in the public schools. He's not qualified. We're back. Walter Williams sitting in for Rush. By the way, you can hear previous Rush broadcasts by going to rushlimbaugh.com and joining Rush 24/7. And you can also get some nice Father's Day gifts. And you can rush because Father's Day is Sunday. And you can also get a prescription to Rush 24/7 and the Limbaugh letter. Or something from the Rush collection. And the Limbaugh letter will probably be good next time because he's going to be interviewing a good friend of mine. And that's Ed Fulner at the Heritage Foundation. Anyway, we are talking about education, and we have Randy on the cell phone from Los Angeles, California. Welcome to the show, Randy.
Dr. Williams, what a distinct pleasure and honor this is for me, sir.
Well, thank you.
First of all, I am a public high school teacher here in California. However, I got about it late in life. I retired from business at 47 5 years ago. My wife, being a 30-year high school teacher, suggested that I take up teaching because all of my jobs, my life in the public and private sector had to do with training and teaching.
Mm-hmm.
And so I sat for the CBEST test about 5 years ago. And to me, it was one of those little tests that you just whip through, and I did.
Mm-hmm.
The youngsters around me, the recent college grads, just a year or so out of school, were telling me they were sitting for their 4th or 5th attempt at this test that I could have passed in the 7th grade.
Uh-huh. And that's the kind of people we have, and we're expecting more out of them. And you're right, it's about a 7th or 8th grade test.
Well, Dr. Williams, I'm finding that many of the people I teach are these retread hippies and yippies from the 60s that would not buy into capitalism, would not buy into public service as far as the military or anything. So there was one place for them to go, academia, and that's where they've been stuck. And I and a couple of friends of mine are the Lone Rangers as far as being the conservative toehold in my high school. And they
well, good for you.
Yeah, they derisively call our classrooms Republican headquarters.
Right. And you can get a whole lot of free market stuff by checking my website. I have some recommended websites for you to go to. I have some links on. They'll be very, very valuable for high school teachers.
Oh, I appreciate that.
Yeah, check it out.
But I have to tell you also that these people are totally clueless when it comes to history and the economy. My bachelor's degree is in business and management. My master in science is in interactive telecommunications. And my emphasis has always been in public policy and in macronomics. So I can sort of say what's going on and take a look and explain to them, and they're just totally clueless. You know, they think that what we need to do is raise taxes.
Right. Well, that's the solution to everything. Thanks a lot for calling. Hey, by the way, you know, another thing that is a kind of follow-up on Randy, I was teaching at Temple University. I taught there from 1973 to 1980. And I was teaching a master's level course in economics. And I had a student. We became friends. He's come by my office for a class, chat, talk about various things. And he told me he taught at an elementary school in South Philadelphia. And I asked him, I said, he used to talk about how he used to laugh at his colleagues, blah, 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 blah. And I asked him, I said, aren't you afraid that you're going to get fired with that kind of attitude? He says, no, they'll never fire me. He said, because I'm the only teacher that can teach long division in the school. So he had protection, he had job protection because he was the only teacher that could teach long division. That is a sad commentary. Let's go to Jennifer. Welcome to the phone.
Hi, how are you, Walter? It's an honor to speak with you. You taught me so much about economics just listening to you. I wanted to take issue with a fellow who complained that teachers out of college don't make what engineers and scientists do or as they come out. He obviously does not realize how much more demanding an engineering program is. There is no memorizing the night before. You have to really know and learn how to critically think and solve problems. You hear a lot of people say, oh, I don't like story problems, the simple two trains on a track. Engineering goes way, way, way beyond that, as well as all the other stuff.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's a challenging set of courses.
And not everybody can just make it through an engineering program. And when you get out, you deserve the money that you make.
Well, it's not deserved. I mean, it's just the market. It's the market.
You've earned it, and the market, right? Because you can't find a bunch of people to just go out there and do this stuff.
That's right.
And I think that you can pretty much pick just about anybody up off the street, put them through an education program, and put them in a school.
Yeah, you just have to teach them how to make those paper maches.
So I don't know why he has a problem with people, getting paid what they deserve to be paid or earned. What they've earned. They went through all the schooling, and it's much more rigorous.
Yeah, well, it's a matter of supply and demand, and you're absolutely right. Let's go to Ann from Stockton, California. Welcome to the show, Ann.
Good morning, Dr. Williams. It's such a pleasure to talk to you. I saw you on Hannity and Combs the other night. You really are as handsome as you said you were.
Yeah, see that these guys don't. They say my head is too big and things like this, but this lady knows what she sounds like an expert in observing men.
That's right. It takes a big head to hold all those reins.
Right.
Anyway, what I wanted to ask you was this, Dr. Williams. It's always seemed ridiculous to me that at the university level, remedial courses of any kind are offered. If you don't know how to read, write, and do basic math by the time you're old enough to go to the university, you have no business being there.
Absolutely.
Am I missing something here?
Well, you're just uncaring.
Oh, I understand.
but that's incredible that we universities spend a lot of resources on remedial training. I believe, and I'm not sure on the statistics, but it's well over 50% of students need some kind of remedial training when they go to college.
Well, then why aren't they sent to a junior college or get a tutor to teach you something until you're able to take care of college courses?
That would be the logical thing to do, but these remedial classes, what they do, they get the high schools off the hook. See, but then again, college administrators, their budgets depend on the number of warm bodies that they have in the school. And so if they held to standards, they would not have as many warm bodies, and there would not be as big a budget.
But I thought there were waiting lists to get into most of the better colleges.
Well, maybe at some of the better colleges, but in general, whenever you find colleges that have remedial programs, that's suggesting that they're trying to boost their enrollment and subsequently their budget. So I don't know. I think I would agree with you 100% that we need to get rid of remedial programs and tell students that if you can read, if you can read, write, and do arithmetic, you have no business in college. Let's go to Kay in Great Falls, Virginia. Welcome to the show, Kay.
Well, thank you, Dr. Williams. I'm a great fan of yours.
Oh, thank you.
I'm a teacher in taught in Fairfax County, probably close to where you live. I've been teaching for about 20 years. And you do have a point about teacher education programs. And as you probably know, in Virginia, teachers are required to be recertified every 5 years, and I'm in the throes of that right now. I've listened to you for a number of years and decided that I should take one of your classes, only to find out that I'm completely unable to do that simply because I need several prerequisites. Can't take your class. And I was very upset about that because I'll finance my own recertification classes, and they're expensive, so I don't want to take it from just anybody. I know what I'm getting from you. So I'm calling to request that you think about something, and that is that you work with the education department, if you will, at George Mason, and come up with some valuable classes for teachers other than, say, SOL preparation.
Yeah, well, I think that, I believe that at George Mason University, in our department, we do have an education training program. I think that...
well, you do, but I've taught for a long time now, so what I'm looking for are classes...
I mean, economic training program, sorry.
Oh, so there is something there,
yes.
Because I didn't find anything, but I think that sort of thing is very valuable for teachers, because in a lot of cases what you find are very elementary, even beyond the master's levels, classes. Yeah. And I want something more because I'd like to be able to give more to students.
Well... Yeah, I teach the PhD course, PhD Microeconomic Theory in the fall, and so you have to be admitted to the PhD program to be in that program. But however, in the spring semesters I teach intermediate economics, and so if you took a class from a very, very good professor, he's almost as good as I am.
Well, can you guarantee that?
And pardon me?
I said, can you guarantee that?
Oh, yes. He's, and the reason why is that he's a professor now, but he took my class as a student many years ago, so that is why he is very, very good. But he's nowhere nearly as handsome as I am. But it's a fellow named Tom Rustisi. Check out his class. It's an excellent class, and good luck.
I will do that. Thank you so much.
We'll be back with your we'll be back with your calls after this.
You're listening to the EIB Network.
Welcome, Walter Williams sitting in for Rush. He'll be back on Monday. You know, getting back to this education stuff, when I was, I took my daughter out of a very nice government school, and we put her in a private school. But while I was interviewing the private school, I was asking the headmistress, I asked her, what kind of teachers do you hire? And she said, we do not hire education majors. I said, the teachers that we hire, they have their degree in the subject in which they teach. And matter of fact, my daughter, when she actually finished college, she got a job teaching an all-boys school. And what they did, she teaches 10th and 11th grade history. What they did, American and European history, what they did, she had a degree in history, which I didn't think was a good idea. But anyway, she had a degree in history. And they sent her to summer school before the fall began, and then taught her some teaching techniques. And that's what I meant when I said, when we went to the break one time before, that Einstein could not teach in the government schools today, the public schools today, because he has not met the teacher certification requirements. Let's see. Let's go back to the phones. Alan on the cell phone from Brooklyn, New York. Welcome to the show, Alan.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm actually calling in response to your show from yesterday. I tried calling in, but I couldn't get through.
Well, we will permit a one-day delay.
Okay. Thank you. I wanted to just disagree with your position on admission requirements for colleges and universities, because I was in a situation when I went to college as an undergrad. I got into the school I chose because I did very well on the SAT. I did very well grade-wise in high school. I'm black, and to had a 3% black enrollment. And out of that percent, I'd say well over 85, 90% of the black students got in through a program that was geared toward minority students who may not have done well on the SAT. Using your rationale, these students should not have been there in the first place. But I will defend it by saying that most of these students graduated doing very well. Some of them are practicing medicine. Some of them are practicing law. One close friend of mine he was named the top minority businessman in Montgomery County outside of D.C.
Well, let me ask you this question here, and that is, what do you think about the morality of a school saying, well, look, here's somebody who scores lower grade on the SAT, a lower grade point average. We're going to admit him over a person who scores higher. That is, like in California at UC Berkeley, they routinely turn away 2,000 straight A white and Asian students in order to make room for black and Hispanic students who scored much lower scores.
I think you're making a very dangerous, sweeping generalization.
I mean, I'm asking about.
That's not what happens in all the cases.
I'm asking you specifically about Berkeley. What do you think about a program that turns away the 2,000 students who score straight A's and admits students who score much lower?
Well, you can't ask that question without asking the question, what about all the students that do get in, white students, who are not qualified? Even our president, George Bush, admittedly was not a good student. He gets into Yale. He's a C student.
But you don't want to.
In the United States.
But Alan, you don't want to answer my question, do you?
I'll answer your question, but you're not.
But go ahead. Well, go ahead. I mean, we have millions of Americans waiting for you to answer my question.
Fine. That undeniably is not the right way to approach it. Nor was it the right way to approach it by denying access to so many of us for so long.
Well, we're not talking about. See, here's one of the problems. Okay, is a white kid today, that is one of those white kids that was turned away at Berkeley, is he responsible for slavery?
I'm not saying he is. Just like I wasn't responsible for slavery.
Well, why should he be burdened by the history of black Americans?
Why are you taking up his side and not once you don't?
No. Wait. See, I'm an individual.
Yeah.
I'm an individual that I first see people as human beings.
Well, you know what? We haven't gotten to that point yet in this country where color
I'm talking about.
matter.
I'm talking about where I'm talking about Walter Williams.
Walter Williams can live in Fantasyland all he wants, but we have not evolved yet in this country or in the world, for that matter, where color is not an issue. It is an issue.
Okay, so you want to make it permanently an issue?
No, I'd like to deal with it as long as it is an issue. And in our lifetime,
see, here's what you're dealing with in the following way. That is, those kids who you concerned about, who got admitted to the college, that had much lower grades and much lower SAT scores.
I didn't say that. I said they may not have scored well on the SAT, and they might have done well on the SAT and not done well in high school, or it could have been reversed.
Okay, well, look. Well, see, the thing is to do, the policy recommendation is to stop the government schools from giving these kids rotten, fraudulent education.
There's nothing rotten and fraudulent with bringing somebody in, because how they did it at my university was they brought these students in during the summer, before the school year starts, gave them some courses in math and in science and whatever, allowed them to kind of catch up from the lack of education they received in high school.
And so over the summer they corrected 12 years of rotten education.
I'm not saying that either, but it helped. And it helped them to the point where they were able to compete more once the regular academic year started.
Okay,
and
but
had these students not been given a chance, where would they have ended up? What are you suggesting, that instead of 3% black enrollment, we had 0%?
No, I'm not suggesting that at all. But thanks a lot for calling in. We'll be back with your calls after this.
You're listening to the EIB Network.
We're back, and we're getting smarter and smarter. Let's go to the phones. Bruce from Battle Creek, Michigan. Welcome to the show.
Is this Walter E. Williams?
That is correct.
All right. I got a question. I have a mother. I was born to a mother. I love my wife, and I also love my daughter dearly. So I'm not begrudging women anything. But women do live 8 years longer than men.
Mm-hmm.
Where are all the men's health studies?
Well, there are a lot of health studies, and there are a lot of studies on life expectancy among men. But here's what I think. I don't think we live so long because I think the women just take advantage of us. And I think that we should have a government program that produces equality between men and women, and somehow get women to live less.
No, I don't want women to live less.
Well, how are we going to have equality?
I want us men.
That's what we do with money. That is, you make
live as long as we do.
Well, thanks a lot for calling in, and I hope so too. Folks, the end of the week, it is time for me to get a drink, go home, and find out whether Mrs. Williams has all of her work done. And Mrs. Williams, I'm warning you, I'm going to do a white glove inspection when I get home. Tune in Monday. Rush will be back.